Welcome aboard Maunie on a grey and wet and pretty miserable day here in Dartmouth. It's 7 in the morning, still pretty dark, and in the cabin it's very gloomy because if you saw the last little video, you'll know that we've started taking the system apart here to replace our old 25-year-old Autohelm instruments and replace them with new technology, Raymarine stuff. So we've got no lights in here at the minute. But we're going to move down into the next cabin today to continue the journey. We're now in the mid cabin and I've taken the headlining off here, and as you can see, here's the rat's nest of wiring that's coming down to this unit here. So this is new technology. This was already here to allow us to put in the Raymarine plotter, so that's going to remain. It's going to be part of the network, but a lot of these old cables are going to go, so we're going to start pulling them through. As you can see, I've labelled them up as much as I can, so one at a time we'll be pulling them through, getting rid of the old ones and working out how to set up the new system. I'm going to get these things to go through here. Went out on the forward heads, and I've taken this cover off where the shaft comes on. This metal pole is the support for the mast, and behind it there's a grey conduit. At the top of it come a couple of wires, and they are the transducer wires for the depth and speed logs, and so we're pulling this wire through from the mid cabin because that's going to connect in a slightly different way. I am making progress, but finding some interesting stuff. So for example, in the hanging locker here there's some more old C-torque cabling, and I think what this was the original owner had something called a yeoman plotter, so you could fold down this table into a nav table, and it had a sort of rudimentary, well, some people like them, a GPS plotter which used real charts. So that's all redundant, so I might as well get rid of that as well, but it all goes through through here somewhere. Yeah, I think we're getting there. We've at least got a number of wires out the system. Still a bit nervous about this little bunch of buggers, but we will keep on going. Moving from the pulling wires out to pulling new wires in, a set of these is a really good idea. They're electricians' rods, and they just pull them together and have a little hook on the end. So I've pulled one through already. And that'll be used to pull through the new backbone cable down to the next cabin. Most of the cables I think are in the right place now, but as I mentioned in the last video, the transducers, which are from the masthead wind indicator, the hull mounted speed and depth transducers, used to go all the way back along here to across the roof and to the instruments. Whereas the new system is they all go to a central box called an ITC5, and if we take the lid off, effectively you can see this one is speed, that one's wind, and that one's depth. It's the only ones I'm going to be using because everything else is linked in elsewhere, and then that links in through the C-torque system into the main network. So what we're going to do is mount this much closer to the transducers and just underneath the mast. Of course, this is a boat project, so what should be fairly straightforward always turns out to be not quite so much. So I was planning to mount this here ITC5 unit in this void beside the mast pole, and it was going to fit in here. Unfortunately, it won't quite fit because there's not enough space there for the cover that goes over this to hide all the gubbins. So I'm going to have to rethink this one, but there we go. Well, I've found a solution. I've cut back this trunking here, and that now will fit. The ST will fit in here. and that'll wire up fine, so that's good. I'm very glad I got the AIS Raystar RS150 fitted last week when it was dry, because yeah, it's not very nice out there now. Having found a place for mounting this, we've now got to just effectively have all the connections for the 3 transducers, which are on these pins here, so they'll just need crimping on. And so I've been able to shorten the wires, so I've got wind coming from the mast, and then the speed and the depth coming from this trunking, and it's a case of just crimping the lines. And I've lived for years without a decent pair of cable cutters, and these are the best tool in the world, because basically you just stick it in like that and do that, and it just beautifully pulls off the sheath, so makes life a lot easier than fiddling around with a knife. And we then just crimp on a connector, and again I bought myself a decent pair of ratchet crimpers, which are much better than the cheap ones you see in car parts stores, because they give you much better crimp power. So it's a case of just working our way through these. Once they're on, we can put this away. Hopefully all this is then done, and we can just simply put the cover back in and not worry about it again. I'm quite enjoying it at the moment, but it's getting sort of slightly tense as we're getting closer, because of course the great on switching isn't very far away, and hoping it all works. So that's the unit. Just needs to go onto the wall there and be tucked away. So wiring done. Okay, so we're at the other end of the system now, and this is the Raymarine autopilot that was put in New Zealand. Relatively new technology, using STNG technology. It was put in wrongly, as it turned out, by a main Raymarine agent in New Zealand, and with great glee, because they have lots of rivalry. The Australian engineers who came to fix it under warranty laughed a lot about how it had been put in and fixed it. So this is connected up to a backbone system, so one end going to the autopilot controller, the other end going to the main system, the plotter. But it's also connected to the old Autohelm ST C-Talk system. So this device here is a converter. So the yellow is old technology. This thing then converts it into new. So we're going to get rid of this. We'll disconnect that, because we're no longer talking to well, the old system's gone, and what we're going to do instead is put in a normal connector, which is all C-Talk NG, to get rid of this, and hopefully then the whole thing is in one language. We shall see. That's the new network. I will pull out the old cables, because there's lots of them, and some of them labelled up with sort of, I'm not sure what this is, sort of history, so it'd be great to just chase these out and get rid of them. But for the moment I'm more interested to see whether we've got the network all working. What I'm not very clear about is where the power comes from. I think it comes from the autopilot, and then that links through and supplies power to the network, but we will find out. I am 90% delighted, because I've just switched the whole thing on. I've plugged the 3 new instruments in, and bugger me, they work. So here's the new fancy one, which will do. You can set it up for different screens, so it's picking up the depth fine. It will pick up AIS when we've got that set up, and I can create that, but it's obviously got the GPS locked in. The autopilot in here is working, so I've got an autopilot repeater there. It's all connecting up to the plotter. A slight snag is the wind speed. I'm getting wind direction, which is moving nicely, but I'm not picking up the wind speed. I suspect that's a connection problem, which I'll need to go back and just wiggle all the connections. But pretty miraculously, it all seems to be talking to each other.
think that's good. So just got to fix that one, and I've got to put it all back together again and tidy it up, and yeah, a fair amount of work to do, but at least I'm pretty impressed so far that we've got it looking as though it's going to work. Well, I've now worked out it all works completely. The slight glitch I had with wind speed when I first clicked it on was actually not the wind speed indicator at all, or the transducer. It was the wind was on apparent, and it was actually getting a fault from the speed log. The good thing is the little ST system, the ITC5 system, which is a connection of all the transducers, has a set of LEDs on it, and it self-diagnoses what the problem was, and it said, yeah, the connection to the speed transducer wasn't correct. Sorted that out, and we're good now. So we can alter all of these to set different parameters. So this is going to be once we've got the whole thing put together properly, we can work out what we're going to have on each screen. But I'm really pleased with the display when they're so bright and clear compared to the old ones. And the next stage is I've got to put all this back together again. I've got to put a blanking plate where the holes were for the original 3, so there'll just be one controller up here, and do the same in the cockpit. But really pleased with this, and it's not been as stressful as I thought, and I think we'll have a much more reliable system than we had before. Just got to sort out the chaos now. I'm back home and starting work on the board that sits with the 3 instruments in the pilot house. So as you can see, I've glued in and fed a couple of plugs for the redundant instruments, and that's where the new one goes. So I've got some veneer to put a complete veneer cover over this, and then we can drill this to the bigger size for the new instruments and set it up. I've just had a slightly scary moment drilling this enlarged hole with a hole saw, but that's going to fit the new autopilot controller, and the idea is then that the other space will be used with the clock and barometer. So once it's been veneered and varnished, it should look good, I think. The next time you see it, hopefully it'll be installed on the boat.